Critical Hits.
Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Nice start banging on the table.
I'm sorry. I'm trying to get situated.
Just got these stress balls too for like
I
that
know.
exact reason.
I'm trying, I swear.
All right. We are back for Critical Hits. Welcome back. And this is our second to last show, I believe. Next week, we got something a little special, something a little bit different.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why this week, like I said before, I have a bit of nervous energy because you always hear you start with a bang, which I think I did. I liked my first episode. And you go out with a bang, which is what I kind of consider this one, even though we'll have another one next week. So today I'm doing the game that inspired the podcast. When I was thinking of an idea of what to do, it was the music from this game primarily because it was so fresh in my mind that made me think about wanting to do this for the podcast. So for today, I am DJ Keen, and I am joined today by one of my usual co-hosts,
DJ B. Millie, that's me.
All right, but DJ Threads isn't able to join us today, so we have another of our usual guests on with us.
DJ Noob.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, DJ Noob. How's it going, man?
Who was here with
Good,
us on Mega Man X, and also was here with us
one.
last week during Kingdom Hearts. And this week, what we're going to be doing is Nier Automata.
Never played it.
One of my favorite games of all time.
Never ever played it.
Some of my
That's
favorite.
why I was so determined to be here today.
Some of my favorite music of all time. So, for the basic ideas of this game, anyone who may want to play this, want to know more about it, has no idea what we're talking about.
Please.
This game was developed by Platinum Games. And these are the people that make what are some of the best of what we tend to call character action games. These are, to define character action, that's like your Devil May Cries, Bayonettas, things like that.
Okay.
Your character has a lot of very cool, sick, stylish combos that you can use in combat. And
It's combat that's very immediately like satisfying to pick up and play, but it's also very deep at the same time, and it's very like stylish and flashy.
Yes.
I see.
Very stylistic. And these are some of the best developers in the entire industry at making these, so much that Platinum... some people talk about the Telltale games, that like Telltale hit it off really big with Walking Dead and their weird sort of story...
like just click and follow.
Like kind of a new take on the old point-and-click adventure style game.
Yeah.
And then everybody started going to Telltale being like, make a Telltale version of our game. Make a Telltale, right?
Yeah.
This is what happened with Platinum Games, pretty much. They made really great character action games, and then suddenly everybody was hitting them with, make a version of our game that's like that.
Yeah, they famously did Metal Gear Rising: Revengeance, which is a game that was going to be canceled until Platinum came on and took on the project because they were the only ones who were like really skilled enough to do it.
Yeah, because they weren't able to get the action the way they wanted to. The story was all chaotic nonsense like Metal Gear always is, but they weren't able to get the action to play quite the way they wanted to. And then they brought Platinum Games in, and they totally made that game amazing. And they've done some Bayonetta stuff, I believe. They also did Wonderful 101, which is a little different, but also very similar.
It's different, but it's still like it's still a Platinum game. It still has a lot. The Platinum has like certain like tropes that they put in all of their games, and Wonderful 101 is a very different game, but it still has like a lot of that like Platinum style to it, where it's very deep and it's very skillful and it's very fun.
Yep. So if you want great character action, you generally go to Platinum Games. The publisher for this is Square Enix. Pretty much everybody knows Square Enix. That's your Final Fantasies. That's all of your like most
Kingdom Hearts,
famous Sony. Yeah, Kingdom Hearts as well, like we did last week.
Chrono Trigger, I believe.
That was back when it was still Squaresoft.
Oh, yeah.
So Squaresoft and Enix, I don't know if they had another part to their name, like Industries or LLC or anything like that. They each made games on their own.
All corporations, anyways.
They each made games on their own. Pretty good games for both of them. And then at one point, the two companies merged to become Square Enix. I think that was during the 90s?
It might have been
Probably.
late 90s, early
late
2000s.
90s, early 2000s, something like that.
Funnily enough, that's how Platinum Games got started. They were two... Platinum Games, there was two separate companies that merged together, and both these companies were made up of former Capcom employees that worked on... They were like sort of like famous for like making games like Devil May Cry.
Mm-hmm.
Shinji Mikami was one of the founding members of Platinum, and he's famous for the Resident Evil games.
Yeah.
And they worked on Beautiful Joe. They worked on a lot of really quality games, and I think that's why Platinum games have that like really like polished type gameplay.
Mm-hmm. And then for anyone who's starting to think this sounds pretty good, if you did want to get this game, it originally did debut on the PlayStation 4. That was February of 2017, so that's almost 2 years old now.
That is insane.
That Nier Automata's been out this long?
I mean, I've never heard of it, but like it sounds like, because I think I've heard it in passing.
Mm-hmm.
Like I've never actually played it though, and I've seen like trailers for it. But that is insane to me that it's about to be. And it's close up, too. Like 2 years since that game came out on the PlayStation 4.
Yeah,
That's crazy.
I remember like being like waiting for that game to like drop at like midnight. I couldn't get it, but I was like excited. I was excited just to like see people, because there was somebody who was like gonna stream it like right away, right at midnight, and I was like so excited for that because I love the first Nier, so I was like really like excited for the second one.
So you can still get it on the PlayStation 4, but it's also available these days on PC and also on Xbox One. They released a version of it that they called the Become as Gods edition or whatever. It has the original game and the DLC that was released, the downloadable content, the after-release expansion basically that came out for it.
The music's good enough,
which was some boss fights, a battle coliseum, and some costumes for the characters.
There's a few things in there, nothing like really substantial, but like it added some coliseums, added like an extra like little like side story with a different character.
Yeah, it's not a huge like story expansion, but if you do like the combat in the game, if you like some of the bosses, some of the challenge, it's a good DLC to get.
And there's some really I'm not gonna spoil anything, but there's like some really
interesting
like
boss fights.
Funny, like goofy stuff in that.
Yeah. So
So tell me what I would be playing. Give me like something to like set the scene. Give me.
I did manage to boil the story down to a very basic version.
Please,
a couple of sentences.
I'd be down.
But I'm probably going to lose you in these couple of sentences.
Okay, I will try my best.
That's the kind of game Nier Automata is.
I will try my best. I'm locked and loaded.
Set in 11,945 AD.
Okay.
It revolves around a proxy war between human-made androids that look human as well, and alien-made what they call machine life forms. These are basically sort of clunky, boxy robots.
Okay.
Right? Lots of squares and spheres and circles. They're humanoid in design sometimes, but they're not like human-looking.
Okay. I mean, it seems pretty forward.
And so an android force known as Yorha in the game operates out of the bunker. It's a reconnaissance base that's in orbit around Earth, a space station, basically.
Okay.
And they fight alongside the pre-Yorha androids, ones that have been around even longer than them, who are Earth-based, and they run a resistance that's fighting against the machines. So there's pretty much no humans. From what we understand, there's supposed to be like
they're on the moon.
A couple of thousand humans, which is like the Council of Humanity, that are still alive on the moon, apparently, and waiting to return to Earth. But now that the aliens had invaded and released these machine life forms, now the androids are all out there fighting for glory to mankind, right? To try and destroy the machine life forms so that humans can return to Earth.
I mean, it seems pretty straightforward. I'm not lost.
That's about the first 5 seconds of the game.
Yeah,
and it becomes less straightforward, and
I'm not lost.
It's interesting, but this is a
androids fight alien robots to protect humanity. Humanity's not as big as it is. I mean, I'm sure it gets much more complex, but
but then you have the other problem, which is the director of the game is Yoko Taro, who, since you don't know much about Nier, you may not know, but that'll tell anyone who does know about Yoko Taro that after about 5 minutes of the game, it'll become crazy, somewhat depressing, very cerebral, very weird, sort of metaphysical. What am I? What are we worth? What are we fighting for?
It takes a while to get there, but it certainly gets there. And Yoko Taro is known for making these like sort of really odd, dark games. He doesn't think they're dark, but they're like good. Sort of dark. They're very
good, and they're very fun, and it's some very big, interesting concepts that he tackles. But primarily, he's been the lead on the whole Nier series, because Nier Automata is a sequel to the original, which was just called Nier.
Okay.
And if anyone doesn't get it from what I'm saying, because obviously they might think it's spelled one way. It's actually spelled Nier. Nier is a name, not just some word. It's actually a name.
Okay.
And so he started off as a scenario writer for another series that came before that the Nier games are kind of a sequel to, but they're all so disjointed, so sort of anthologies of their own, that it doesn't really matter. The connection to the original series isn't really important by the time we get to Nier Automata. So
this music better be dope.
It's very dope.
Good.
Some of the best music
I'm definitely going to... I've been talking about the Chaos language a bit, and I'll talk more about that when we get back and into before our second set of music. So you'll hear some. Our first set of music definitely has Chaos language in it. Pretty much all of our songs do.
What is Chaos language?
Yeah, I'll talk about that during our second section. Okay. But for now, I want to talk about what we're going into for our first break, our first group of music. And I have...
What do we got? I mean, I'm excited. It sounds just cool. I mean, the concept sounds cool.
So I have 3 songs. The first one is the City Ruins, which is the first sort of exploration area in the game that you get to. You have a tutorial section. You fight a little boss before you go through a small area, but it's all kind of tutorial. This is the first open area that you get to.
I have one question. Like, when you get to Earth and fight the robots, is it like geographically correct? Like, do you go to New York?
No, they don't have.
Darn it!
They aren't quite so well defined. Of like, this is New York.
Darn.
Well, because it's also been like 10,000 years since New York existed. So
yeah, you'll just have like generic sort of city ruins of what used to be a metropolis and some desert areas and some stuff like that. It's not quite as well defined as that.
That'd have been so dope.
And then I also have Peaceful Sleep, which is a song that plays when you're at the Resistance camp. That's the pre-Yorha androids when you're interacting with them.
The bunker?
No, the bunker is where the Yorha androids are operating
not the pre...
from.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
The
bunker is in space.
That's the space station that orbits around Earth.
All right, I'm
still
following.
So when they go down to Earth and meet with the Resistance androids who've been around since before Yorha ever existed.
Cool.
This is the song that plays there. It's pretty slow, pretty calm, because you're just walking around talking to NPCs and stuff. It's like a town.
Okay.
Pretty much. And then we finish off with Birth of a Wish, which technically is our first like big boss fight of the game, but the version of Birth of a Wish that I've pulled is not the one from that boss fight.
There are multiple versions of Birth of a Wish. There's actually, I think there's like 4 versions of Birth of a Wish.
3 that I could find. There might be an 8-bit version of it. But the idea is when you get into that boss fight, the story-wise, it leads into that boss fight with this whole group of robots, machines, that are all kind of stuck on this concept, this idea that they keep repeating over and over and over again, and it's almost supposed to seem like this sort of crazy cult just before they lead into making you face a big boss and like attack you.
Okay.
The problem is, as they keep repeating that phrase, that carries over into the song, which in context, in the game, that's an amazing thing. And it works very well in that situation. But even as I was trying to pull these songs, it was getting a little grating.
Interesting.
As they keep repeating that phrase like through the whole song. So I chose not to pull that version of the song because it can get a little grating, but it works really well in the game. Instead, I pulled the version of the song that they use for a different boss fight, a side quest, like optional boss fight.
Okay, cool.
Which is pretty much the exact same song, slightly different.
Without the culty rants?
Yeah, it's slightly different, but not very much. It's very similar.
Cool.
But it doesn't have the constant ranting robots in it. And in this section, the one thing I really wanted to talk about was the very first song we're going to get into, The City Ruins. I like to do a little bit of my own editing, interesting stuff with each of these shows, as you know.
Yeah.
And I decided to showcase the dynamic music that they have in this game.
Okay.
By doing a little edit on The City Ruins. So they'll often create multiple versions of tracks, like a quiet version that'll usually happen when something depressing or downheartening happens in the story, or when you're just walking around a town calmly and talking to NPCs. There's a medium version that'll generally happen when you're just off wandering and exploring the area. And then a dynamic version, which will usually happen in huge story segments that are high action or during battles with enemies.
It can happen if you're in like a busy, like a bustling area. There's one spot in particular where you're on like this like main street, then you can go into these alleys.
I call it a dynamic music setup in this game because there's no gap. As you're adventuring, you'll hear the medium one, and then suddenly a bunch of robots jump you, and it immediately transitions into that part of the dynamic version of the song. It doesn't just start the dynamic version of the song from the beginning.
Oh, interesting.
It just starts up the dynamic version of the song at the same part in the song where you finished off. And so I'm not going to be playing a bunch of different versions constantly for all the songs. I picked sort of the one that I thought fit the place where we are in our discussion and in the story for each one. But for the first one, I decided to showcase these. So for City Ruins, I have it fade. I have about 30 or 40 seconds of each of these.
Okay.
And it starts in the medium, the normal adventuring one, shifts into the dynamic, which would be like battle music or high action sections, and then shifts into the quiet, which would be calm or downheartening or relaxed section. And then for about 30 or 40 seconds, I have it shift into the 8-bit version. Okay. One of your characters in this game has the ability mid-combat to hack into the enemy robots.
Oh, cool.
And it creates this top-down shooter
that's fun.
Type of thing that you use to basically break their defenses and attack them. And if you succeed, they'll like explode and damage themselves and the enemies around them and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, that kind of goes into the normal combat too, because Yoko Taro really likes that like bullet hell gameplay where there's like bullets flying all over the place.
Oh yeah,
so he
there's a lot
of
that.
In.
And so what they did is for a lot of the areas in this game, pretty much any place battle could happen, they created an 8-bit version of the song, which shifts right in the middle of the song, just like all the others. If you start hacking, suddenly this 8-bit MIDI-like version of the song starts playing. Something you'd hear out of like a Nintendo console or something like that.
I'm extremely
Do you know
down.
how they do that effect?
I remembered learning it at one point, but I can't remember. We'll talk about it a little bit.
It's very interesting how they do that effect, so that they don't have 8-bit versions of every song.
Yeah.
So when you hack, what usually happens is that first it bit crushes the soundtrack, then it crossfades to the 8-bit version. That's what usually happens. But if they don't have an 8-bit version, instead they apply a filter to the song in real time.
You just get kind of this downgraded version of the song.
Yeah, it's an 8-bit filter, and it does this all like naturally. So there's no like the song never breaks. It's all really like natural and intuitive. Not intuitive, but like it flows really well. So it never takes you out of the experience.
So it's really amazing how they've done all this stuff.
I'm down.
But we will go into our first one. So first we have the City Ruins splice that I created from all the different versions.
Cool.
And then we'll meet with the Resistance camp, and then we'll get into our first boss fight, and then we will be back.
Let's do it to it. I'm down to hear it.
I
Welcome back.
That was interesting.
You really don't like the lyrics.
Oh, man, I was so uncomfortable. Those lyrics. The music was beautiful, man. Like, the music, the actual music itself was gorgeous. Like, I'm sure it fit the mood perfectly, but the minute they added those accented words that, like, were not words that, like, oh, man, I was just uncomfortable. Like, make a word in any language, please.
As DJ B. Millie was just talking about, what we just heard was not in any language, any real language. It's what's known, I don't think, by the original creators. I think this is something the fans came up with in the first Nier game, and it just sort of stuck, where they call it the Chaos language, or they called them the Chaos language. And the whole idea behind this is actually a good point to talk about the vocalist, Emmy Evans. So she was asked to write and sing lyrics in made-up futuristic languages. As I said, the first Nier game takes place like 3500 or 4000 AD, something like that.
Okay.
And this one is now in 11,000 AD. And so these are supposed to be fake, like, futuristic versions of the actual modern languages that we have now.
Interesting.
After all these weird changes and all this time has gone by. So what I love about it is that she doesn't have any direct experience. She didn't have any direct experience doing this sort of thing, creating fake languages. But she'd done, like, church choir and school stuff when she was a kid, where they were doing Latin, German, French, Italian, all that. And then she grew up listening to Japanese kids songs, which at the time she couldn't understand, but she liked to mimic them as a singer and stuff like that. Yeah. And so she wrote songs for the original Nier game, the one that this is a very, very indirect sequel to.
Yeah.
And in that game, the songs that she wrote were based off of Gaelic, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French, English, Japanese, and Latin. And so she would listen to clips of language lessons online, things of that sort, for whatever required pseudo-language she was coming up with. And then she would get, like, the sounds, the rhythms, and then start imitating the flow and create similar sounds that would fit with the melody. So that's what the Chaos language is. In its basic form, for each song, they'll come up with a language they want to use that fits the style of the song that they're trying to create, or that they've already created, because they'll usually have the melody first. And then she'll come up with a pseudo-language, or they will work on coming up with a pseudo-language similar to that language, but not actually that language, and sing in it.
My question is, in the game, does anyone speak English or Japanese? Is there a tangible language that I could understand?
English, but in a lot of ways, you can consider this almost like when you go into a Star Wars game or a Star Trek game and they're like, the common tongue or something like that, right?
That's
Rather
fine.
than, everyone in this game speaks English, it's more like everyone in this game speaks a language and they can understand each other, and they make it so that you, the player, can understand it.
That's okay. I was just saying, like, does everybody speak in Chaos language and I'm going to have to read subtitles and be uncomfortable the whole time I'm playing?
No, but there's some vocal cutscenes. There's not as much. There's a lot of sections where it's just like normal dialogue like you get in an RPG where no one's saying anything. There's just text on screen. But there's plenty of places where your characters, which actually I should probably talk about the characters because I love the names of the characters. One of them not so much. I don't think there's any weird allusions to 9S. You're androids, so you have like designations for your names rather than actual names.
Oh, okay.
Like numbers and designations. I don't think there's any weird allusions based on his name. But one of the characters you play as is number 2 Model B, so 2B.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and B
another
stands for battle, like combat unit.
Yeah, the designation is based on what their purpose is. So B, she's a battle android. And then 9S, I don't think there's any weird allusions for him, but he's a scanner, so he's a support model basically, and he travels with 2B to help her.
Okay.
And then there's a section where you play as him, and then there's another character in the game who is A2. Model A number 2, and that's Attack Android.
Okay.
And so you're probably already getting very Shakespearean vibes off of these characters.
Yeah.
Which is great because that's absolutely what they intend for you to get, both in a good way and a bad way.
Like, what do you mean?
They intend these ideas of to be or not to be, or A2, or to kind of define these characters for the players in a way that you're like, okay, I can kind of understand this character now that I know this reference. But then they also play on that in some ways where it's like, oh, is this character really like that, or are you just making assumptions?
Well,
yeah, because the game is all about a big part of the game is about how the androids and the machines are like sort of like finding you. Like very early on in the game, the machines start exhibiting, even though they're machines, they start exhibiting like human behavior. And the androids are all confused because they're like, why are the machines doing this when we're the ones who are supposed to be like modeled after humans?
There's actually a really kind of quick way to describe kind of like, I don't know, rude or violent almost way to describe the machines in this game, which is like aliens create machines, machines become obsessed with humans, and then human emotions destroy the machines.
Oh, wow.
Right? So it's like they become obsessed with humans and they start trying to emulate humans and human emotions, but it just ends up destroying them, and they get caught in these, like I was talking about with that last song, they get caught in these cycles, like chants or almost cultists, get obsessed with certain concepts and ideas that they can't shake, basically.
It doesn't destroy all of them, but there's a few that like
it destroys a lot of them.
It destroys a lot of them, but I think it's more that like it's more to show how powerful like emotions or like these certain human concepts could be. Because there's one point where they talk about one of the robots is supposed to be she's supposed to encapsulate the emotion of love, and what happens when love goes too far, and she becomes like this obsessive.
She becomes this hyper-obsessive fangirl that's trying to become beautiful for some guy who doesn't care about her.
Interesting.
She starts killing other like robots and androids to like add to her body to become more beautiful.
Yeah, basically they try and emulate human emotions, but they
go
either
extremely far.
In the pursuit of it, they like destroy themselves.
Oh, interesting. Or
maybe you could make the argument that human emotions are just so messy and so chaotic that they just destroy robots.
It's more that the robots don't understand how human emotions work, and that's why
I don't know. In some cases, maybe they do, and it's just not. They can't handle it. But anyway, so. What was that? Oh yeah, I was talking about the chaos language stuff.
Yeah.
So most of it is like one language, maybe two languages here or there.
Okay.
And we're not going to get into it as much in our next section of music, but we will in our third, where there's one song that's what I consider the purest form of the chaos language, because it's the first song that Emmy Evans worked on back in the original Nier, not here on the sequel, but on the original one.
Okay.
And so they were still trying to figure out the process, figure out if this idea they had of coming
to
up with
make a fake language,
futuristic languages would even work. And so she took a lot of different inspirations. And so there's just one song that has a chaos language that was designed off of like all 8 languages that she used.
Oh, wow.
Like all of them together create this one song, but most of the others are like one language here, one language there.
About to be uncomfortable.
That one might make you really uncomfortable.
I'm down.
It's a good song, man. It's like one of the best songs in the entire like game.
Yep. Oh yeah, we're already running a little long, so I think we'll jump straight into our second chunk of music.
Woohoo. Down.
So for this one, we move on to... Yes, I wanted to talk about the roots in the game. That this game has multiple endings, 26 technically, one for every letter of the English alphabet, but 21 of those are basically just like joke endings or you abandon the mission, blah, blah, blah.
They're not canon.
It's like, okay, the game's over, you got an ending, you got this letter ending, now get back to the game and start playing for real, sort of thing, right? There are 5 endings, which are, actual canon. They're part of the storyline. A and B are the same story twice, pretty much, but from 2 different characters' perspective. And one of the reasons I want to talk about the different routes in this game is because a lot of people bounce off this game either at the end of A, when they're like, hey, the credits rolled, I finished the game. It's like, no, you didn't. Keep playing. because there's a lot of interesting stuff you're going to miss if you stop at A. Or they get into B and they realize this is just the same story over again from a different person's perspective. All the endings are going to be like this, and they just stop midway through B because they don't want to play through the same story. But it tends to start getting different later on in Route B. Not so much the story, but the characters that you're playing as, the two different characters you're playing as, started like splitting up more and doing different things separately later on in the story.
Okay, cool.
And so it's not just the same story all the time. In B, you get to see it from different places and do different things that you didn't get to see pretty much about halfway through Route B. It starts changing up a lot.
Yeah, and that's when they start getting like split up more often.
Yeah. And then Route C really encapsulates endings C, D, and E. So you really only have to play through Route C like once, and that'll get you to pretty much the end of the game. And then you play through just the ending section, the last 20 or 30 minutes of the game, in sort of a different way 2 other times to get endings D and E. And that encapsulates them. That's what's really important. If you get endings A through E, you've seen the Nier Automata story.
Oh, interesting.
You really... especially E. You really want to go through E. There is so much emotion and so much important information that happens during E.
Ending E is where Ryoko Taro reaches. I was talking a little bit about this during our break, but when Yoko Taro makes a game, the most important thing to him isn't creating like the best story or creating the best gameplay. He always strives towards a certain goal, and ending E is where he like hits that goal and like. It's perfect. It's like it's one of the most. We're not going to say what it is.
That's basically the end of the game. So we're not going to say what happens. Just get to ending E because that's the real important one, and that's basically all of the story. All of the story except for maybe the DLC if you've got that, but there's not a whole lot of story in that. It's mostly just boss fights and arenas and stuff.
All right.
But yeah, if you get through ending E, you've seen all the really important stuff. So. I also wanted to talk about the roots because our next section of music that we're getting into, our first, actually all 3 of our songs, you'll find all 3 of them in Route A, but it's kind of the mid-section getting towards the end of Route A, right? So our first song...
Route, R-O-U-T-E, correct?
Yes, R-O-U-T-E.
Cool.
Our first song is The Amusement Park. This is... almost exactly the midsection of Route A, I think. You're getting pretty close.
It's just about.
Maybe Pascal's Village would be the midsection.
That'd be like where the midsection would be. This is like right before the midsection because it's a very short
This is the amusement park, which I love, and just visually I love because you come to this rundown old amusement park that's still barely standing.
Oh wow!
And you just see. Like we talked about these robots trying to emulate humans and human emotions. You see this amusement park just filled with robots dressed up like jesters and stuff, just like throwing confetti and partying and dancing, and like none of them are trying to fight you.
Yeah,
that's
they're totally.
You can go in and you can start attacking them and fighting them if you want, but none of them will initiate combat with you.
Yeah, one of them is a tank, and the tank is just shooting balloons.
Yeah. The tank is actually driving around and it's like firing confetti and balloons out of its gun.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's so amazing and so beautiful. And this music starts up. The best part is, like, you don't really notice it. It's kind of like a gate, and you approach the gate, and then, like, as soon as you go through the gate, suddenly fireworks go off, and all these robots come out, and this song starts up right then. And so that's a lot of fun. And then we get to our second big boss fight, which is one of the most amazing songs in the game. And that is a beautiful song, and it's your opera theater boss fight.
Oh, okay.
And it's great. And they use this one a lot in the trailers and promotional material for the game. This is a boss that they showed off a lot before the game came out. And I just really love that song. And then we get into the Copied City, which is a very important place, so I'm not going to talk about exactly what it is, but it's one of the big twists story-wise in the game when you get there.
Down.
So we will jump into those, and then we'll be back to talk about some of our last songs and pretty much finish up our discussion on the game before our third set of music.
Sounds fun.
We will be back in a little bit.
Through Hãy subscribe cho kênh Ghiền Mì Gõ để không bỏ lỡ
Welcome back, everybody. I am your host, DJ Keen. I'm joined by DJs B. Millie and DJ Noob. And we also have someone else joining us now for this last section, who is...
That's right, it's me. It's DJ J Star making his, his debut on the air, finally, after all this time.
Well, welcome aboard.
Thank you very much, sir.
Hopefully our listeners aren't quite as creeped out by the lyrics as DJ B. Millie seems to be.
It's so upsetting. Like the song is great, but
your brain is struggling to create real words out of it.
Exactly. My brain wants to make a word and it just doesn't, and then it's like it's not even Latin. It's just like
If they
a thing.
slowed down the Animal Crossing movie, language, and then sped it, and then had it as an opera, that would be it.
My goodness, it is a mess.
That mostly wraps out Route A for us. We have a big final boss fight music for the boss of Route A, but that mostly wraps up all the storyline stuff for Route A and Route B as well, since, as I said, Route B is pretty much a replay of Route A from a different character's perspective. So with my last chunk of music that we're going to be getting into, I'm going to be taking us into Routes C, D, and E. And so we'll have some interesting stuff there. But before then, I wanted to talk about the vocalists for Automata specifically, because in the original Nier, primarily we only really had Emmy Evans, who was doing the writing and the singing for all the Chaos language stuff.
Yeah.
And we also had Keiichi Okabe, who's the main composer of a music production studio called Monaka, and all of Monaka was working on Nier. They were generally putting the melodies and all that sort of stuff together.
Cool.
And then Emmy Evans would work on the Chaos language to go along with the songs and the setting and fit the style. All of that sort of stuff. But then when we move into Automata, we get a lot of Chaos language, a lot of different songs. It's still Monaka. Emmy Evans is still working on it. She does sing in the Nier Automata soundtrack, though she tends to sing on this invented French-derived kind of language is where she's doing the singing. But we also have some not Chaos language songs. Some of the songs, really just one, I think, was sung in a Chaos language version, and then an English version and a Japanese version, and then I think that French-derived one that she did, although that might have been the Chaos language version. So on the Japanese one, we get Yoko Taro actually wrote it himself, the lyrics and stuff for it, and then it was sung by Marina Kawano. And then on the English version, instead of Emmy Evans, we actually got Janique Nicole, who's this new singer, was relatively unknown at the time. Apparently her mother was also a singer in Tokyo and had worked with Emmy Evans before. And so then when Janique goes to Tokyo and wants to become a singer, and her mother introduces her to Emmy Evans, and, so they come up with the idea for the project, and she's like, I'd like you to come and sing with us on this thing.
So this is kind of like her breakout role.
Yeah, in some ways. She's also done some other musical projects of her own, and she's a backup singer for a famous Japanese singer as well. But yeah, this was the first time she'd ever done anything in games, basically. And darn, we were talking about so much during the break, and a lot of it's now just gone.
Yeah, I don't remember what we were talking about, but I think we were talking about the Chaos language. I know we were talking about the Chaos language, but I actually don't remember what else we were talking about. There was so much.
Oh, the importance of some of our songs that we actually, actually have coming up. I think we have actually mostly covered all the important stuff. As long as people know this is a great game. You can get it on PlayStation 4, you can get it on PC, you can get it on Xbox One.
I might have to go buy it or rent it.
Don't stop after Route A. Don't bounce off mid-Route B. Route B gets better about halfway through, honestly, when it starts getting more freeform and more stuff that you didn't experience during the day. definitely get through routes A, B, C, D, and E. That's the story of this game.
I'll probably have to put this game on the list after I finish up the other games I still have yet to play on my PlayStation.
Yeah.
So everybody knows that Nier Automata is a sequel, and people have this impression that because it's a sequel, you have to play the first Nier to kind of understand what's going on in Nier Automata.
No.
But Nier Automata is mostly a self-contained story, and
as
that
I said,
being said, I love the first Nier also. It has one of the best stories I've ever heard in any game, but the gameplay's not that great.
Yeah, in the first Nier, they weren't working with Platinum Games yet. So they were doing all the gameplay stuff themselves, and it's a bit more clunky. The combat doesn't feel
as
good.
Deep. It's not bad, but it's very simple. But I wanted to say
it's still an interesting game, but it's much simpler and also just in general a little clunkier.
Yeah.
Not quite as fun to play combat wise and gameplay wise, but it's a good game. If you want to play it, go ahead and play it. But as we said before, the two Nier games, the original and Automata, are really more like an anthology series. They are in the same universe. They are kind of a sequel. One's kind of a sequel to the other.
There's references between them, but
but there's so much time between them and so few references that you're not going to miss too much by playing just Automata or just Nier, if that's really what you want to do. But
yeah, they're both these games. They're both some of my favorite games for a very good reason. Then they're both really worth your time. The first Nier is a little bit hard to get now because it's only on PS3, I think.
I think it was only ever released for PS3.
It has that sort of clunkiness to it, but they're both definitely worth your time. And Nier is very popular now. Ever since Automata, it was kind of relatively unknown before, but after Automata came out and
well, the thing was,
exploded in popularity.
There was a long portion of time where I don't think they were planning to release Automata.
That's why it was such a shock when it came out.
The original Nier did not sell well. The original Nier gained this major cult following much later into its life, like you find for some movies like Evil Dead and stuff like that, where these did not do well at the box office, but millions of people love them now. Right? The original Nier gained a massive cult following later on, and it was only when you got all those fans and that big outcry of this is amazing, we love it now, they decided to do Nier Automata. But they knew how clunky the game was and kind of not great to play it was, so that's why they went with Platinum Games to develop the gameplay and the combat and all that.
There's you mentioned that all the fans try to these games get huge cult followings even if they don't sell well, and then which kind of forces the developers to make the games kind of like that. This kind of reminds me of a similar situation back maybe 2012, 2013. It was back on the Nintendo Wii, and then because the Xenoblade Chronicles only had it was a game on the Wii, and it only got a Japan release, and people apparently really liked the game, and they were pushing for a US release, but no one said they were going to do it, and they'll finally the pressure was so much they finally released Xenoblade Chronicles on the Wii in the US. So this is kind of like a similar situation,
which is a great thing because Xenoblade Chronicles is actually a really good series and really great music. It was one of the ones that I'd considered putting on the show, but we've just kind of run out of time this semester.
Yeah. That being said, if Yoko Taro wants to remaster the first Nier with Platinum and remake the game, but better, I'd be down for that. So. Yoko, if you're out there listening to our show, I know you are.
Yeah, that's probably not going to happen. But if they do that, I'd also like to add on top of that they release a version of the game which has both Gestalt and Replicant, so you can choose which one you want to play.
Yeah, we didn't go into that. In Japan, there are two versions of the first Nier game. There's one where you play as the older brother of a girl named Yona, and there's one where you play as the father of the girl.
So the original that they released was called Replicant, and in that one, there's the girl, and you play her older brother. So you're I don't know, maybe 15 when the game starts, and you end up maybe 20 by the time the game ends. Pretty young guy, but he was kind of a froofy, frilly, Final Fantasy-esque looking character, and the Japanese developers had this idea of American gamers as they don't want these frilly-looking guys, these, feminine-looking guys. They want these big meat wall idiots with big guns. Yeah. They want their Dooms and their Duke Nukem's and their those kinds of things.
They're Kratoses.
Yeah, and so they ended up creating, they had Gestalt, which is the version where you play as the girl's father, and he's this big, muscly, scarred-up looking guy. It looks all tough and
kinda
burly and stuff.
Too.
Yeah, he's kind of hideous. And, yeah, I believe both of them got a release in Japan, but they only ever sent Gestalt to America and to the West.
I kind of prefer that version, to be honest, too. I like the storyline of him being a father more than him being a brother.
Yeah.
I like that he's like kind of ugly looking too, because that's not very. Because most of the time when you like have your Kratoses, they're very cool, like attractive looking guys. But Papa Nier is not a very attractive man. He's very like ugly looking, and I think he wears like in the second half of the game, he's wearing like a jockstrap on his head.
It looks like that. It's supposed to be an eye patch. But yeah, it looks like this. It looks like this black leather jockstrap or something over his head. It looks really bad. But I only came to the idea that I would like to have a version of Replicant that we could play in the West more recently, because my understanding is that the storyline is actually, in my own personal opinion, I think better with the older brother. It's sort of more deep. There's a little more tragedy in the background of it. It just seems like a deeper story than you get with the Gestalt version. But anyway, that's never going to happen. But if they did, that'd be great if they brought on Platinum Games to redefine the combat, and they made it so that like Gestalt and Replicant were on the same disc and you could just choose which one you want to play. That'd be great. Yeah, well, not going to happen.
They might do it. You never know. They're a version of Nier Automata, a Game of the Year version, got leaked recently, so that could happen one day. It's very popular now. I honestly think it'd be crazy for them to not go back to it, because they're already working on another game, actually, I think.
And they were never intending to release Nier Automata on the Xbox One because they just weren't familiar with it. They weren't really going to design for it. It's a Japanese company, and Xbox doesn't really sell in Japan. It just doesn't. It sells very poorly, at least in Japan. And it was the rabid fan base and the amazing reception that Nier Automata got that they're like, oh, right, I guess we'll go ahead and release it with the DLC. And that's where we got the Become as Gods edition or whatever for Xbox One.
Yeah, Nier is so popular now that 2B is actually going to be a guest character in Soul Calibur 6. So
yeah,
now I can finally have 2B fight Joseph Joestar in Soul Calibur 6.
I think her background, her stage,
it's the City Ruins.
Is the City Ruins, and I think you have like 9S and the pods in the background doing something.
You can see a lot of the machines in the background. There's like they're in the windows, and you can see like one of the big machines like walking down on the ground. It's a very nice looking stage, and the music is great, of course.
Well, from what we've heard already, this game already has great music, so why not incorporate it into Soul Calibur?
Yeah. All right. Speaking of, I think we'll go into our last section of music, unless there's anything else you guys need right now.
No, I'm pretty good.
All right.
I'm good.
So there's a couple of things to talk about here. We start off our last section of music with a song called Crumbling Lies, which is kind of the start of Route C. It's the real big major twist at the beginning of Route C, which is why I'm not going to go any deeper into what it is. You guys need to see this twist with your own eyes.
Aha, see this twist with your own eyes? You're good at this. You're good at this.
So that's Crumbling Lies. And then we move on into Song of the Ancients, Atonement. And this is one I definitely wanted to talk about because I've said to my co-hosts that are sitting here, I don't think I said it on air yet, I might have, that I think the purest version of the Chaos language is in Song of the Ancients.
I think you said it off air.
Yeah. This was the very first song for the original Nier that Emmy Evans worked on, and they were really still feeling out this whole process. They weren't even sure that this whole idea of these fake futuristic languages would even work. So she wasn't really sure exactly how the process should work. And so she ended up looking into like 8 different languages. And I'd listed them all off here somewhere earlier on. Here. Gaelic, Portuguese, Spanish, Italian, French, English, Japanese, and Latin.
Jeez.
She looked into all of these. And
it's a lot of language.
Yeah. She developed the Chaos language, the very first version of it that she used to create the very first song she made for them, Song of the Ancients, based off of all of that. And so I tend to think of Song of the Ancients as the purest form of the Chaos language because it uses them all. Most of the other songs that you get in the original Nier and in Automata will use like a pseudo language based off of one language, maybe 2, sort of based off.
And this one has 8.
Yeah, sort of based off the feeling that they're trying to create in each song, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if it feels like a specific type of music from a specific place in the world, they'll use that language and then base a pseudo language off of it. But yeah, this one was created off of like 8 different languages. And so I love this one. I adore it. B Millie is going to have a heart attack.
Oh, goody.
But
so good.
But I love it so much that I was telling him during the break that even though it's complete garbled nonsense, I actually know quite a lot of the lyrics. Not all of them, but a lot of the lyrics for Song of the Ancients, even though none of it is in any actual language. Ooh. Just because I listen to this song so much and I love it.
Well, it's a good song. Some people say this is probably one of the best songs in the Nier games. This is it's definitely up there. It's a great song.
Yeah, this song was really important to the first one, really important to 2 characters from the first one, and had so many different versions because it had a version that each of them sang individually, and then it had a calm version that they sang together, and then there was a version that they used at some point much later in the game with some big important spoilery reveals that was used as a battle version of it, which was much faster and harder. And so they had all those versions in the first one. And then I think it might have another version in this one, but this one's Atonement. And this is important where just like the characters are trying to break into like the final dungeon pretty much, and they're just being assaulted from every angle and fighting and trying to hack into a building at the same time, and it's just going crazy. And it's a wonderful point, especially for people who played the first Nier. This is an amazing part of the game. And then finally we will move into a song which a lot of people are going to be like, why? This song is called Grandma, and then in parentheses afterwards it says Destruction. So this is another song. I know that name sounds crazy. This is another song that was important to people who played the first game. There's a character in that who the most important relationship in her entire life was her grandmother, who was like the only person in the world who supported her and built her up basically and helped her be herself and all that sort of stuff. And then she dies, sad, but not huge sadness. Or actually, yeah, it is. I was going to say she died normally, but she didn't. She actually was killed by the...
It's very tragic.
Yeah, it was very tragic. I just remembered she was actually killed by the monster, and then at one point you face off against this monster, and it's trying to like create this mist to confuse you, and then is trying to like imitate her grandmother's voice to try and steal her purpose to fight, her willingness to fight, right? To leave her sort of broken and empty.
Yeah, it's trying to get her to just give up.
Yeah, so that's why this song is Grandma Destruction. It's her overcoming this creature's attempts to like manipulate her and fighting back against it. And so it's very important to the first one. And for another reason, which is major spoilers, so we won't get into, it's very important to this one because at this point in the game, you're in the final dungeon and the enemies try to steal your character's will to fight by presenting something before him. And it's his like resolve to keep going regardless of what they've just shown him, pretty much. And so it works very well in this one, but the name makes no sense without the backstory context. So we will get into those 3, and then we'll be back for any last-minute additions that anyone needs to say. I think I'm pretty much done, unless anyone else.
I'm good.
And then we will move on to our outro song. So we will be back in 10 or 15 minutes. All right. I am DJ Keen, and I've been joined today by
DJ B. Millie, that's me.
And
DJ Noob.
And lastly,
DJ J Star.
All right. I think we had one or two things you still wanted to talk about.
I don't remember. we talked about a lot of stuff during the break, so I forgot what I was going to say. But I'll end it with this, I guess. This game is it's really special to me because of like what it makes me feel. There's very few games that make me feel the way the Nier games do, and they're definitely worth your time. But what was I going to say about them? We've talked a little. We've been talking for almost 2 hours about the game. We've barely even scratched the surface of what's in Nier. There's so much in this game, not just like for the story. Mm-hmm. Even the side content is really good. Like I was talking a little bit about the weapon stories.
Oh yeah.
How every weapon in Nier has its own story.
There's like 30 or 40 weapons, I think, in the game.
There's quite a few, and every time you upgrade a weapon, you unlock a new part of the story. And even though even the stories just in those weapon stories are very like there's some really like amazing and like really like dark, depressing stuff in those stories.
There's some beautiful stuff. There's some super heartbreaking. That's one thing you have to be ready for if you want to go into any Nier game, Nier or Nier Automata.
It's going to be very depressing.
The creator of this game tends to live in and like sort of a very depressed, downhearted, just sort of lifestyle, I think, in general.
He doesn't show his face in the media very often. He usually wears like this like funny looking mask. He usually wears like a mask of a character named Emil.
Yeah. And so he tends to bring that into his games. It's not all darkness and all horrible, but there are some heavy subjects that get handled, and there's a lot of sort of dark stuff and also some very sort of high-minded concepts and things that get touched on. Very cerebral stuff.
Yeah, and you see bad things. You see really bad things happen to characters that you love. Like I was talking a little bit about Emil during the break, and I love Emil so much. And I used to actually, whenever I heard Emil's song, I actually used to cry a little bit whenever I heard Emil's song because of what happens to that character, and not just him, but he Kaine also, who's also in the first game.
He gets it pretty bad in the first game and in the second game, honestly.
Yeah.
Emil gets it pretty bad. But the stories are very interesting. They can get dark at times, but they're very interesting. And as someone who doesn't like dark stories, as someone who has like willingly chosen that I will never watch Berserk, that I will never watch Game of Thrones.
Oh, you should watch Berserk. Berserk is so good.
I don't care. I don't care how good it is. Same with Game of Thrones. I know it's amazing. Everyone tells me it's amazing. I refuse to watch it.
Game of Thrones gets less amazing as it goes on, but Berserk stays good.
Yeah, but I don't care. I don't care how good these things are. I don't like really dark stories, and so I choose to avoid a lot of this stuff. But Nier Automata was worth it. It gets a little dark and it gets a little heavy at times, but it's not all darkness, and there's a lot of really great things in it.
There's moments. Yeah, it's not really edgy, but it's very dark. But even in the darkness, there's like moments of like. There's like moments of like happiness and hope and like joy in there. And
there's
actually
goal. Surprisingly for Yoko Taro, there's more of that in Nier Automata than there are in most of his other games.
Yeah, the first Nier is way more depressing. The first Nier is like makes you feel like a monster as you're playing it. That game is like
the first Nier ends on a massive downer that only really gets any sort of hope or lightening up if you end up reading into the story that happens after the first game that was never put in a game but was in like some book he wrote or something that happened later.
That's something else about the Nier games. They're not very big. So people like kind of like make fun of Yoko Taro because he fragments his story so much. Like if you want to get the full Nier story, you have to like read like other books and you have to like watch stage plays.
They weren't so big on the stage plays back then. For the original Nier, it was mostly books or comics or things like that. But for Nier Automata, it's pretty fragmented. Now, ultimately, I'll preface all this by saying you don't need any of the other stuff. Nier Automata stands on its own very well if that's all you want to play. But there are 2 Japan-only stage plays, a couple of blogs or books or things like that.
They're books that are in Japanese only right now.
Yeah, that all have to do with the story like surrounding Nier Automata, but none of it sort of directly with the story in Nier Automata. So you can play the game just fine. And all that other stuff is just sort of icing on the cake if you're interested, but it's difficult to get your hands on. I think I'm pretty much done, unless you guys have anything else.
Sounds cool. That's pretty much all I have to say.
Yeah, it sounds like to me, it sounds like a really fun game. But if I wasn't so busy playing all these other all these other titles I'm doing right now, I'd probably give it a look. Because I like JRPGs, like, your Final Fantasies, your Kingdom Hearts, your Xenoblades, of course.
Yeah.
But this kind of looks like it's up my alley.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I still want to get my hands on the Become as Gods edition, the one for the Xbox One. And I want to play through that with all the DLC and everything, because I think that'd be a lot of fun. But we'll leave that for now. And we've been going for like 2 hours now.
Yeah.
I know that our mentors, our advisors, actually prefer us to do live content. They're always saying, if no one's on the board, get on the board.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
They'd rather we do live stuff than just play music constantly. So I don't think they mind. And I'm still not intruding on anyone else's board time yet. Jesse's show doesn't start for a while, and I don't know if he's doing it today. I think he is. I imagine he is, but it doesn't start for another, hour or so. Yeah. But we are done for the day. We are going to go out, and I've decided to give Brandon's aneurysm a slight break.
Thank goodness.
Our final song is not going to be in Chaos language. As I said, there was one song that they recorded in multiple languages, both Chaos and some actual languages for this game, and that's the final song of the game, the outro song of the whole game. It's called Weight of the World. And there was a French-derived language that Emmy Evans performed it in, so I don't know if that's in a language that's actually very similar French, or if that was a Chaos language she made based off of French. I don't remember. I don't know for certain. But there was also a Japanese version. But what we're going to be listening to is the English version, and it's being sung by Janique Nicole, who is a singer in Tokyo, I believe now, and who's performing there. And aside from appearing in this, I don't know what else she's done game-wise, but I know she's a backup singer for a popular Japanese performer over there. So we will be listening to that, Weight of the World's English version. And I will see you guys, and hopefully Bimili, and I think DJ Threads will be able to join us, but she has to get back to me on that, whether she has to work next week. Next Wednesday, 10 o'clock, for a very special specialty show. I pretty much consider Critical Hits done at this point. Next week, we're going to be doing our honorable mentions. Either songs from games that have one or two great songs but not enough to fill a whole show, or great songs, a single great song chosen from a game that I probably would have put on the show, but we just ran out of time.
Didn't have time, yeah.
Yeah, so we're gonna be featuring a lot of different games, and structure-wise, I think I'll probably just play the songs one at a time, and then we'll come back and talk about the game and the song, and then another one, and like that. So we'll change the structure a little bit next time.
All right, sweet.
Yeah, so I will see you guys next Wednesday, 10 o'clock. We are out of here.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
to laugh. 'Cause we're gonna shout it loud, even if our words seem meaningless, like I'm carrying the weight of the world. I wish that some way, somehow, that I could save everyone.